The balance of power in the U.S. Senate is at play this November, and the race for one of Virginia's Senate seats is playing a really important role. The candidates are Democratic incumbent Tim Kaine and Republican Hung Cao. We have invited both gentlemen to participate in a wide-ranging interview to discuss the issues with us. Today we have Mr. Kaine joining us. He's represented Virginia in the Senate since 2013 and is running for a third term. His other political experience includes serving as Virginia's governor from 2006 to 2010. Before that, he was lieutenant governor, and he was also the Democratic nominee for vice president in 2016 on the ticket with Hillary Clinton. It is so good to have you here in studio with us today.
Simone, it's great to be back. Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to start just first of all, okay, a third term. What makes you want to seek a third term?
I've loved representing Virginians, showing up for them and standing up for them for 30 years now, since I was a Richmond City Council person. And my goal is to get around Virginia, sit down with people, hear them talk about either a problem to solve or an aspiration to achieve, and then walk side by side with them to do it. I'm on the Armed Services Committee, super important to Virginia, where I chair Sea Power, Ships, Subs, Navy, Marines. I'm on the Foreign Relations Committee, where I chair the Americas Subcommittee. I was a missionary in Honduras. I'm fluent in Spanish. I can travel throughout the Americas, and it's wonderful to be able to interact with about the 10% of the Virginia population who's Latinos. And then I'm on the Health and Education Committee. So working on those issues, they're everyday issues that matter to folks. So I have a lot that I'm proud that I've done, but I have a lot more I want to get done.
I wanted to talk to you too, especially with election season, I think voters can really get bogged down. Things can kind of get saturated with information, who to vote for, who not to vote for. What are your top priorities if you're reelected?
My top priorities are keep the focus on Virginia. I really, some look at the Senate as a DC job. I look at it as a Virginia job. It's about Virginia and Virginians. My top priorities are continue to work to grow the economy in a way that provides opportunities for all. I really like the work that we've done recently in Congress to do an infrastructure bill. We're building again. Manufacturing bill. We're manufacturing again. We're innovating again with clean energy investments. Just did some last week. So continue to grow the economy around innovation, infrastructure, and manufacturing. I want to make sure that we're safe. So being on the Armed Services Committee, where I really focus on America's safety and on strengthening our alliances around the globe. Virginia has a NATO headquarters in Norfolk. We care about alliances, and so that's another priority. And then finally, the last big priority would be healthcare, making sure people have lower cost prescription drugs. We've done some good work, more to do, but also that women have the ability to make their own reproductive decisions. I think that's so important, and that's very much at stake in this election.
We're going to dive into that. I wanted to go back to the economy and kind of expand on it, because it's just a massive issue. The economy, by all metrics, by all intents and purposes, it's performing well. Things are doing pretty good, but day to day people are saying, look, I'm not doing great. I'm having trouble making ends meet. We're hearing that consistently from voters, especially from Virginians as well. What would you tell them that you would like to get done that you have not in this past term, specifically that could impact their day-to-day life?
Here's something, cost of prescription drugs. We were never, at the federal level, we weren't negotiating with pharmaceutical companies on that. We are now doing it. We negotiated on the first 10 drugs under Medicare, and it's going to save seniors and the taxpayers $7.5 billion a year. We obviously have hundreds more drugs where we need to negotiate prices with pharmaceutical companies, but the good news is we passed a law, it was the deciding vote in this, that enables us to do that negotiation. Let's keep pushing prescription drug prices down. I've been a supporter of what President Biden has done on public service loan forgiveness and giving people relief on student loan debts. That really helps your pocketbook. If you're dealing with other issues, but suddenly your payment on your student loan is less, or you've been forgiven your student loan, it's easier to think about buying a car or maybe moving from your apartment into a first house. So those are some examples of things I've done already, but I think we obviously need to do more.
Let's talk about reproductive rights, which you had just touched on a moment ago. It is so important to voters. I know you've been hearing them say that, specifically abortion rights since the overturning of Roe v. Wade. What should Congress's role be moving forward?
Congress should, I have the only bipartisan bill in Congress that would codify Roe versus Wade as a national protection for everyone in this country. Access to abortion, but also access to contraception. This is a bill that I've introduced with Senators Collins and Murkowski, Republicans, Senator Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, Democrats, and it's the only bipartisan bill that would do this. We need a national protection for women to be able to make their own reproductive decisions about abortion, about contraception, and about in vitro fertilization. And that's what we need to do. Now, the good news is Virginia is the only state in the South that still essentially protects the rights of Roe versus Wade. But that could be overturned if Congress were to embrace an abortion ban, for example. So I'm also going to do everything I can to fight against proposals that are on the table that could ban or strictly limit abortion at the federal level.
I'm curious, what limits do you support when it comes specifically to abortion?
Sort of where Virginia is. Virginia allows women to make this decision without a lot of interference up to the point of viability, which is usually 22, 23 weeks. After that, it is harder. You usually have to get certification from a number of physicians that continuing to carry the pregnancy would endanger your life or your health. And those are the kinds of restrictions I've supported in the past. Virginia also requires that minors seeking an abortion, they either need to notify their parents or prove to a court satisfaction that they are mature enough to make this decision on their own. Those are limitations that I have supported as reasonable in the past and still do.
All right, let's talk about, as a Catholic, you've really had to balance your faith with governing.
Yes.
Take our viewers through how you balance the two, especially when it comes to something like abortion rights.
Yeah, abortion, LGBTQ equality, the death penalty, these are issues that I've grappled with. And I think any person of faith or any individual in a representative role, you come in with your own views, and those views affect how I live my own life. But we are a society that has many different religions and many different faith traditions. And I've never believed my job as a Catholic elected official is to use the law, especially the criminal law, to mandate that everybody else follow rules that my church asks me to follow as a Catholic. I think it's fine for my church to ask me to follow rules in order to be a Catholic, but to enforce rules by the criminal law, for example, in abortion, to say that, look, we're going to criminalize the behavior of women and doctors if they make the choice to terminate a pregnancy. I just think that goes too far. So live according to your own values or the values of a church that you believe in, but don't mandate that all other Americans have to follow those rules.
Let's talk about housing, because look, whether you buy or whether you rent, people are just struggling, right, to pay their mortgages, all of that. How can the Senate and Congress help specifically in that regard?
And Simone, this is something I care a lot about. I was a fair housing lawyer for 17 years before I ran for state office, helping people who had been discriminated against all around the Commonwealth, either because of race or disability or family status. So what can we do? First, it's good news that the Fed is dropping interest rates. They've done it once, they're going to do it again. That'll make it easier for somebody to buy their first home. Second, there's a bill pending right now in the Senate that passed in the House in a big bipartisan way that would expand something called the low-income housing tax credit, which is the wonderful federal program that helps build out the quantity of affordable rental housing. We should vote on that House bill. It was bipartisan there. We should pass it. And then the third thing, I'm very impressed with what Vice President Harris has announced on the home ownership side. The LIHTC is for apartments, but what about home ownership? Let's do down payment assistance for those buying homes for the first time. States do this to some degree. Local governments do it to some degree, including the District of Columbia has done this in the past, but they tend to be programs that sort of start for a year or two and then kind of fade out. Right. We've never done it at the federal level, and I think if we do down payment assistance, that can really help people make that move from their apartment into their first home.
Is this something where if you're reelected and Kamala Harris is also in office, you could see this tangibly happening in the near future?
I can. There are some things where, you know Washington very well. Right. You cover Congress. There's some things where the two sides are really at odds. Mm-hmm. But on the housing issue, I know my Republican colleagues are hearing exactly the same thing I'm hearing. Mm-hmm. And around Virginia, I've noticed this year, Simone, that it used to be that housing would be a top 10 issue, but maybe a top 3 issue only in Northern Virginia. I would say housing costs are sort of a top 3 issue in most parts of Virginia right now. So again, expand the quantity of rental housing that's affordable, but then also have tools available to enable people to make that move from rental to purchasing a home, and down payment assistance could really help with that.
Definitely. All right, let's talk about immigration and the border. What measures do you support and not support when it comes to undocumented immigrants entering the country?
I support comprehensive immigration reform, and 3 times during my time in the Senate, I've supported packages that would invest big money on border security, but would also provide paths for people to come to this country to join our workforce, which we really need. And if they're following the rules and paying taxes and doing all of that, they could become legal permanent residents and eventually citizens. So I think you need to pair investments at the border, both to stop people who shouldn't be crossing, but also to interdict fentanyl, for example. But then we need legitimate paths for people to be able to come here. Immigration has kind of been the transfusion in the American bloodstream that's kept us young at age 250. I will say in the 3 times that I've supported a comprehensive immigration reform bill in 2013, massive border security investments, a deal that I helped negotiate with Republican senators in 2018, border security for dreamer protection. And then most recently, in the last few months, we did a big bipartisan negotiation on border reform. Each time we've gotten close, but the last 2 times President Trump has told folks don't vote for it. And so Republican colleagues on the other side, even those who initially suggested they were for it, have melted away. We need to stop talking about the problem and being committed to solutions. And I actually think, as hard as this has been, I think the low unemployment rate in this country is going to open the door to the solution, because I don't think we can have the workforce the nation needs without really addressing this immigration issue.
Well, to that point of actually getting something done, I know that you don't support amnesty for undocumented immigrants, but what measures do you support that are actually possible in a bipartisan sense when it comes to the border? I know you've touched on a few, but truly, if you were talking to a voter, where do we go with this?
Well, if we would just listen to voters in Congress, I think voters would want more border security investments. We should do that. Now, we have made some investments that are helping us interdict more fentanyl. That's great, but we only have that technology deployed at some of the border crossings. We need to make sure we invest and deploy it everywhere. Let's do that. Let's have I would say, a more robust work visa program, because a lot of people who come to cross the border, they're just coming because they lack economic opportunity. I was a missionary in Honduras in 1980 and 81. I know why people leave countries, because there's nothing for them there. But we don't make it easy for people to come for work. And so they come and they try to claim asylum or refugee status when they don't really fit into that category. But then that gums up the courts for years before they can decide the claim. If you had a more robust work visa program and you vetted people and let them come, pay taxes, earn, go back home, invest those money back home, I think that would help the workforce, and that would be something that my colleagues could support.
Okay, I wanted to talk about guns, because according to the Virginia Department of Health, on average, 3 Virginians die every day due to firearms. Does this country need more gun control? And if so, what types of measures?
I think we do, Simone. And look, I've got a lot of scar tissue over this. I was the governor of Virginia when the mass shooting happened at Virginia Tech, April 16, 2007. Absolutely the worst day of my life. The worst day of my life. And you know what? I wish I could say that that was the worst tragedy in the history of the United States. It was at the time, but it's no longer. There have been other tragedies that have eclipsed even that awful day. We've got to do more. Now, in Virginia, we have done some things at the state level. We have expanded the comprehensive nature of background checks so that people can't get weapons if they're going to harm themselves or others. We've looked at extreme risk protection orders, particularly for folks suffering from, mental disabilities, that at least during that period, let's not let them have access to weapons. We've restricted to some degree the number of handguns you can purchase a month. Those things in Virginia are helping Virginia. Virginia is one of the safest states in the country right now when it comes to violent crime, and I think some of those rules are helping. So I have supported at the federal level many of those rules, and I've also supported an assault weapons ban. We had one in the mid-90s to early 2000s. It was allowed to expire. I think that was a mistake. I think you could put that back in place and you would find that it would increase safety. And the last thing I'll say, this is a heartbreaker. I have 3 kids. They're 34, 32, 29. I never worried when I was dropping them off at the Richmond public schools when they were kids, would I be able to see them at the end of the day, or would some disaster happen? But even since my youngest, my 29-year-old daughter, graduated, things have gotten worse. And I had a teacher tell me the other day, there's a moment of silence at the beginning of school in Virginia every day. And this teacher told me, I know what every adult in the building is thinking during that moment of silence. Every day, every adult is thinking, let today not be the day. That's such a burden on our kids and on our teachers and our school personnel.
We have about a minute or so left. To the undecided voters, who we know always play a big role in elections, what would you say to them? I
would say, look, I have spent my life, first as a civil missionary, then a civil rights lawyer, and an elected official, just trying to serve others. And I say, I'm going to show up for you, and then I'm going to stand up for you. And it's about producing results. Whether we agree or disagree, whatever region of the state you live in, I'm in your neighborhood. I know your community. I'm listening to you. I've gotten a lot done, but I have a lot more that I want to do, and I'm going to do it by listening to you and then tackling the challenges that you tell me are the ones that need to be tackled.
All right, look, we certainly appreciate your time today. We appreciate you coming in and having these conversations in such a contentious election season. So thank you very much for the dialogue.
So I'm glad to.
All right, Senator Tim Kaine joining us today. And on Thursday, we did want to let you know Hung Cao, the Republican candidate running for this office, will be joining us in studio. We'll have very similar questions, and we look forward to that conversation and to that dialogue as well.